Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about reversing in a straight line to begin with, and then we'll deal with reversing around a corner in another video. But straight reversing is probably the first type of reversing you're going to do. The first thing to think about is how to sit in the seat. It's no use sitting in your seat normally like this and then trying to look back, because you won't see very much. You won't get your head any further around than that, and you'll see through that window instead of through the back window. And it's important to be able to see through the back window, so the best thing to do is turn yourself in your seat, a bit like I'm doing now. If you want to, you can actually remove the seatbelt for reversing, but do remember to put it on when you're going to drive off again. You shouldn't really need to take the seatbelt off unless it gets to a point where you can't stretch it anymore and you need to take it off, because it won't actually allow you to turn in your seat. So you can if you want to, but if not, just position yourself so that you can see through the back window, and you can see all of the back window. Then you can see through that window as well, and sometimes a little bit through the other window. But you've got a better all-round vision than you would have if you were just looking in the mirror. In the mirror, all you're going to see is what's through the back window, and you won't see what's happening through the sides as much. It's also important to get reference points when you're reversing. So in a moment I'm going to turn the camera on so that you can see what I can see through the back window, and you can see the reference point for the curb. By doing that, you'll be able to keep it in a straight line, and you'll know when you're going off course, slightly away from or towards the curb, and you know what to do to correct that. Before I show you that, I'll talk a little bit about the steering. When you're reversing in a straight line, you can actually hold the steering wheel with one hand at the top of the steering, and then if you do need to reposition the car, you're only going to need to move the steering a tiny bit towards or away from the curb to get your position correct again. That little bit of steering makes a really big difference when you're in reverse. So if the car goes off course, it goes slightly away from the curb, you're going to steer slightly towards it, and if you're going towards the curb, you steer slightly away from it. If you steer too much, that's going to go in the opposite direction, and the front wheel could touch the curb if you're steering away from the curb, because the front wheel is going to steer towards it in a sense. So be careful about the amount of steering that you're going to do. You don't need an awful lot, just a little bit, and that adjustment will be quite dramatic when you see that. So sometimes you can also support yourself if you want. Put your other arm behind the passenger seat and support yourself so that you can actually lift up a little bit more. I'm only quite short, so when I'm reversing I do have to lift up a little bit to see what's going on and to keep my accuracy there. So it isn't a comfortable position to be in, but it's an important position so that you can actually see what you're doing and you do it correctly. And as I say, by using one hand, it's a lot easier as well to support yourself with the other arm. So I'm going to grab the camera and turn it around for you. Okay, so now the camera's in the position that my head was in before, and as you can see, you're looking through the back window. The camera's not got such a wide-angled lens, so you won't actually see as much through the camera as you would with your eyes. With your eyes, you've got peripheral vision, so you will be able to see through the side window there, and you would be able to see through that side window a little bit if you were looking over your left shoulder. So the straight curb is positioned just to the left of the end of the wiper, and you can use that as a reference to tell if you're keeping the car accurate in a straight line. If that curb moves slightly to one direction or the other, then you know you're either going towards the curb or away from it. So if you're going towards the curb would move slightly to the left of where you see it now, and if you're going away from it, it'll move slightly to the right. And when I talk about slightly, it only needs to move an inch in the back window, and you've probably moved about a foot away from the curb or towards the curb. So as soon as you see that curb changing position a tiny bit, adjust your steering a tiny bit, and that'll compensate for it. Don't wait until you've got a massive gap, otherwise you're going to be in the middle of the road, or the opposite is you're going to be on the curb. So you really need to get used to concentrating on where that curb is and keeping it in the same position. Another way that you can judge it is by looking through the door window, and you'll see there between the car and the curb there's a slight gap. Normally when you're reversing you've got a little bit more space. You would give yourself a bit of breathing space about a foot away from the curb, so that gap might be slightly wider. But don't forget that the door mirrors are convex, so things look slightly further away than they actually are. And that means that when you're looking at that, you might think there's a big gap, but really it's not as big as you think. So try not to get too close, otherwise if you try and get away from it, as I said before, your front wheel will actually hit the curb as you're trying to steer away from it. So they're the two ways that you can check the accuracy. The other thing to remember when you're reversing is to keep checking around in front as well, and over your blind spot to the right. So frequently, as you're reversing, keep checking ahead and then back to the left, double check in the mirror what you can see for the accuracy, and then back to the back window to see what's happening there. Things can change very, very quickly, so do keep your head moving. The other thing I want to mention about this is the amount of time that you spend looking in the back window as compared to the mirrors. A lot of people actually think that the mirrors are going to help them a lot more than the back window, so they tend to just look in the mirror as they're reversing. I like to compare it to a video and a photograph. So you would take a photograph in the mirror, but you would be taking video through the back screen. So a longer period in the back window and just quick snapshots there to double check it, and then back to the back window to check your accuracy. But not only the accuracy, you're checking for vehicles and pedestrians, any hazards that might be behind you. So hopefully that's explained a little bit about straight reversing, and we're going to look at left reverse in another video.